The reason why I decided to host this particular coffee chat about this particular topic, instructional design, was because instructional design right now is at a very exciting juncture, and it has been for a while. If you think about all of the possibilities that we have in front of us as instructional designers, think about the new technologies that you can use, the new methodologies that you can use to actually deliver designs to people, and the new ways that we can think about creating content and mapping curriculum. It's all very exciting for an instructional designer geek, right? So I hope that you listen to this coffee chat recording and you get a lot of ideas and a lot of inspiration, and most importantly, a lot of motivation, right? Because right now, I think that there are some instructional designers out there that may not exactly feel enthusiastic about what they do. And that is because, for whatever reason, being an instructional designer may have a little gray cloud above it, but feel proud about what you do, because you all are out there and you're doing really great and important work for the humans within your organization. So have a listen to this recording, take away some really good thoughts and ideas. And in the chat are all of the resources that we talked about. So thank you once again for joining me this Friday. And I hope to see you not next Friday, but the Friday after, when we talk about fun with mind mapping.
It's like every email communication with our SMEs, and every meeting we set up, we've created templates. And so we can kind of run through the full ADDIE process, kind of templated and simplified, if that makes sense.
I gotcha. Yeah, and many people are using that sort of mixed. So ADDIE and Kirkpatrick. So yeah, you use the Kirkpatrick when it comes to the formalized E part of ADDIE, most likely. And I use, the kite. I want to get into that because that's a new one in my brain, so I'm like, that sounds interesting. ADDIE for planning, and then rapid prototyping, right? So some form of agile and SAM. Okay. Backwards design. Oh yeah, backwards design. Yeah, reverse engineering design. Excellent. I'd like to get in, Chris, I'd love you to talk about that a little bit more when we have a chance. And then cluster. Now that's a new one too. See, this is why oh my God, this is why I love you guys so much. It's I knew I would learn new things. Cluster learning design. I like this as ADDIE or SAM. Awesome. All of these new things. All right. So a word, simplified ADDIE in Blooms. I'm a big Blooms person. I have a Blooms template that I like to use, as far as being sure that, not so much about learning objectives. I don't know about you guys, but I have thrown the concept of learning objectives to the wayside. I am focusing more on learning outcomes. I want to know what the action is rather than the actual, learning objectives are geared towards what happens within the four walls of the classroom, right? What are they going to learn within those four walls? Learning outcomes are, now that it answers the so what question. So you've gone through the learning, now so what? And so learning outcomes helps us point towards that, the so what. So I find myself using ADDIE and writing in learning actionable learning outcomes, and the Bloom's taxonomy helps me do that a lot. And so that's kind of where my focus is. But I would really love to, oh my gosh, I'm going to totally butcher your name. Gila?
Oh, hey, Shannon. Hi, everybody. You said it just right. Most people do butcher that, as you can imagine. So I'm super happy.
Yay! Is it French?
No, it's Scandinavian.
Oh, okay.
And I'm in Seattle here, kind of a stronghold of, in the old days, Scandinavian weirdos that came up here.
So you're getting lots of rain up there.
Oh, well, we had snow, which is very rare for us. Yeah, we were totally snowed in there. We had 12 inches. Come on.
12
We usually
inches
don't
in
get,
Seattle?
yeah. And now it's all slush and snow and rain. So you got us down. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. You guys probably were totally not prepared for that.
Oh, no, not at all. Hey, Shannon, I wanted to reinforce what you were saying about objectives versus outcomes.
Okay.
I think it's really important. It's not just a language thing. It's looking at the difference between the two. And outcomes are literally, if you look it up, what will have changed, right? By the end, what will have changed? So behavior will have changed. They'll be able to do something. And I always consider an objective just kind of this aspirational, we hope this will happen.
Right.
And often the objectives have words in there like you will know or you will identify, and all that kind of stuff is crap. Because how can you possibly check it or assess it? Whereas an outcome, you can see if they're doing it and assess that.
Right.
Even online. And that's the challenge, is the online stuff. So thanks for bringing that up immediately.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I am totally on board with that. And I'd love for us, when we get later on down the line, if we have time, where we can differentiate between, the virtual space, the e-learning space, and the live space. And how can we make those outcomes come to life? And that's what a good instructional design model will help you do. And so to that, talk to me about KITE. What is KITE?
So because I taught instructional design, I have a ton of instructional design books on my shelves, and a lot of them are like 400 pages long. And you guys can relate to that. I mean, and a lot of them look like electrician's diagrams, if this, then this, blah, blah, blah. And I was really looking for a research-based but rapid approach. So I started to, there was a metaphor that came to me. This is like 15 years ago, of a kite. And when the kite kind of is a metaphor for instructional design, and it really simplifies things. I found that people in my classes, these were all obviously live classes at that time, really caught what it was to develop a class fast. And in our world, and these are subject matter experts I'm typically working with, not L&D professionals. So they have no background. They just know a lot about a subject, whether it's accounting or engineering or whatever. So I would give them this approach, which is kind of easy and lean, and they would just take it and run with it and create classes in a pretty agile manner, which we need because things change so fast. As you know, I mean, business needs are changing all the time. So we needed a really fast way to pivot with this instructional design stuff. And in the old days, I don't know if people were around then, but people would take like 6 months to create a course. I'm sorry, ain't gonna happen, So the kite is a great approach. Here's the book. I'm not here to hawk my book. I just wanted to say that many people are using this approach and just finding it easy and fun, just like flying a kite is fun. So that's why Leslie, who's on here, gave me the link to join the meeting. I haven't been in any of your meetings, and I just was thrilled that you were going to be talking about this. So I'm all ears.
Well, thank you for joining us. And that just leads me to also say, thank you to everyone who's new. So if you're new to this conversation, or rather, if you're new to the chat, go ahead and put that into the chat itself, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to just go ahead and discuss. And for those of you who haven't been here before, I apologize. I just sort of jumped into the topic without really leading into it, because I'm just super excited about this topic. Instructional design, I'm not an instructional designer by trade. I'm a learning strategist. But I find that if you're going to do your job well as a learning professional on any level, you need to be able to have the knowledge that works around instructional design, and that means coming in from a human-centric perspective, right? And I see a lot of you nodding, and that's awesome, because it's about, and those of you who have listened to me before or who've joined in before, that one of the main things that drives Learning Rebels is that we have one job as learning professionals, and that is to advocate for the human within organizations, That's our main job, right? And to advocate for that human, that means putting good training in front of them, good learning in front of them, not disrupting their workflow, being sure that they're taken care of as people, because sometimes we know that businesses have different agendas, and we want to be sure that we meet business goals, and we want to be sure that we add business value, but we also want to take care of the human that makes those businesses come alive, right? And so that is what drives me, and that's why I get really excited, stupidly so, about instructional design, because I just feel that it's just so important. And Gila, I'd love to. I'm on Amazon right now, so we'll find your book, and I'll put a link to it. Or if you have a link to it, feel free to put it in the
I'll go
chat.
get it.
Yeah, go ahead and put it in the chat. And Chandra, welcome. And yeah, it's just so, Rebecca, welcome. I just love to see new faces here. Linda, Taruna, I see your name all of the time. Everywhere I see your name. And I've never said it out loud. So I'm sure that I'm saying that wrong. People have a pronunciation in their head, and here it is. But I'm happy to see you here, because I do see you on Twitter. I see you, in a lot of different places. So welcome. And thank you for sharing your, oh, good. I'm 2 for 2 on names today. That's awesome. So I'm happy to have your book here in the chat so people can, have another resource from which to learn. I think that that's awesome. So thank you for that. Oh, the 6 Ds. The 6 Ds is another instructional design model that's been around almost as long as ADDIE. So the 6 Ds, Dick and Carey, all of those, so the 6 Ds sort of follows that same premise. So Kathy, do you want to talk to me about how you're using the 6 Ds?
Well, essentially, when we put together any program, like the ADDIE model, we're looking at what are the outcomes. What do we want people to take away? What do we want them to do as a result of what we're teaching? Then we design the experience really kind of around the context of the learning, if that makes sense. So whether it needs to be a blended, whether it's a short classroom, whatever that would be. And then, of course, we deliver it, and then we do some things with looking at how do we expect that information to transfer. You all were just talking about that, learning transfer. And then what support do they need to keep that program or keep that learning applicable? Does that make sense? Or actionable? And then, of course, we evaluate document results. And, you're looking at surveys, you're looking at patient experience, you're looking at employee experience, a number of things, as you all were talking about, to see, was the learning sustained? Did we sustain it? I'll tell you, we probably have the hardest time with, it's employee experience, but customer service types of things. We try to keep that in front of folks, but that's one that's always, looking to be refreshed, if you will.
Right. I completely agree. And I threw in the chat the link to the 6D model. And the 6D model is all about defining the business outcomes, designing the complete learning experience, deliver for application, drive learning transfer, deploy performance support, and then to document the results. So it's to me, it's like this little broader scope of ADDIE, and so Kathy, I think that you said that quite well when you're talking about making sure that the transfer happens, right? Because we can have the best training in the world, but if nobody uses it and it's not applicable and it's not relevant, then it just sits there and grows dust bunnies, right? And that's really not what we're looking for people to do.
And Shannon, the other thing I'd like to throw out to the group as you're talking is even the readiness. You have some people that hardwire and really role model certain things that have been taught, but then, we all know that, is it a performance or a training issue? We've all been there with that. So anyhow, just a thought about readiness, and I'm going to mute.
No, continue. I'd love for you to expand on that topic. Talk to me more about your idea of organizational readiness.
Well, I think what we've seen this past year is not a lot of readiness because of time. And we had to be very creative. I mean, nursing education had to continue to go out there and change the way they educated too. And we used a lot of online learning, which was challenging because of time. But I think now, I mean, at least in our ministry, our healthcare ministry, we have to revisit readiness and what does that mean to the frontline employees and what do they need now? We've got a lot of new folks coming on board into the workforce. So a lot of our experienced folks have retired. So, did we capture that intel? Probably not as well as we should have, or kept them on as mentors or however.
Right.
But anyhow, and that's my take on it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Kathy. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Now, I think that this is a really good point when you talk about readiness. That means that if you, again, we can have all of this great training, but if the company doesn't support it, then it's not going to get the reach that we're hoping for, which is why an instructional design model is super important, because it helps you figure that out, or a good model helps you figure that out, right? So we were talking about, who was it that mentioned cluster? Let me go back in the chat. Oh, Jody, talk to me about cluster.
Sure. So this is something that we've really been moving to as our workforce has changed, in that now everybody's working from home and we're hiring younger and younger folks to work. Those younger folks work differently than folks of a different generation, right? Even like just people my age have a different way of going about things. And I don't know if you guys are like me, but now if a question comes up, so if somebody says, hey, why is the sky blue? I cannot move on with my day until I know why the sky is blue. Like, I am pick up my phone, Google it now. Like, as you guys are saying stuff, I've got Google open and I'm just typing everything in so I can have it all there, because I can't move on until I know these things. Like, I just have to know right now. And so that's where like the 5 moments of learning need, I think, are so important with what we're designing for learning, because a lot of times we were designing these formal learning moments. That's not what our learners actually needed. They needed learning in the moment. They're sitting at their computer, they're filling out this form, what answer goes in that spot.
Right.
They don't want to 3 weeks from now come to a classroom training to find out what answer goes in that spot. So learning cluster design is all about looking for opportunities to create small clusters of learning that people from various audiences or needs could use that item depending upon where they're at. So you might have a class that someone comes to on how to fill out that form, but you might also have a quick click through PowerPoint that could walk them through each field on the form. You could have a recorded thing that you've done. You might have an e-learning, like you could have all sorts of different pieces that would hit depending upon who the learner is, where they're at in their day, when they would need that moment, like need to know that thing. So the learning cluster is really like just kind of on that idea of how do you create smaller pieces oftentimes that can be reused and create kind of a cluster around the topic. And that book that I had mentioned, I'd put it in chat, Learning. Fantastic book, walks you through the whole thing. And what I love most about it is every time I read a new book on instructional design, it's like, throw out what you know about instructional design, do it this way. Throw out everything you know, do it this way. This one actually shows you how what you're already doing fits into their design model. And so that's something that for me, like, I just am tired of throwing everything out and starting over. And so I love being able to repurpose and reuse some of the stuff we already have.
Totally agree. And when you held that book up, I was like, yes, I just bought that book. I haven't read it yet. But so now I need to go in there and I need to read it and find out what it's all about. So I'm super excited about that, because I am with you. I am so tired of trying to reinvent the wheel. Why as an L&D function do we insist on doing that? we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We can take what we know and adapt it to what we need it to be, and it's the same thing with Addie. And I saw way back early on in the chat that somebody had said that they're glad that I'm not the only one who still uses Addie. Excuse me. But here's my take on Addie, is that Addie is like learning how to roast a chicken. There's a way to do it. There's a way to do it well. And then once you understand how to do it well, then you can add all of the other stuff on top of it. Then you can change the ingredients around, and then you can change, its preparation, and then you can start brining or whatever it is that you want to do with it. But you have to understand the rules first. And once you understand the rules, then you can go off, you can do whatever it is that you need to do and adapt, right? And that's the way I see Addie. Addie, to me, for me personally, are the rules, quote, not in cement, but it's a good guideline in which to use. And that's how I use it,
The other thing that I really like, about this idea of learning clusters is they really focus in on behavior change. Like, what do they need to be able to do, like you talked about earlier, but then how does that, like, are you actually having them do the right thing? Because you go that next step. Like, it's like, well, I want them to be able to handle the call in 2 minutes. Well, is that really what you need? Like, do you really want an agent getting to that 1 minute and 58 mark and cutting off the conversation and hanging up that phone so that they've got that 2 minutes? Mm-hmm. Or do you want them, is there something else that's truly what you want? Like, you want good customer service. So it ties back to what are the things that are important to the business, and how does this thing help that, as opposed to us just being order takers in L&D, like, oh, we need a training on this. And it's like, no, you just need to tell your employee to show up for their shift. Like, that has nothing to do with training. Like, I can't train them to come to work, and so, like, you got to find that balance. And oftentimes it comes back to, like, yeah, we can build a training on that. Like, I can build a training on coming to work, but, if you're not willing to do your part as a manager, or we're not willing to put our money as a company behind this because it's that important to us, then the training's not going to do any good. We're just throwing, bad money at it. So.
Right. Exactly. And that's why the point earlier about organizational readiness becomes super critical. It becomes very critical. And I'm looking through the chat here, and you guys are having a great conversation, and I'm trying to keep up with it. Everybody's typing so fast, I can't do that. But what I would love is, Carol, you mentioned something about learning quads. So
so Shannon, that's what, I'm sorry I don't have my camera on because I am not camera ready today. Oh my goodness. But I have to say that after trying to make that square peg fit in the round hole, right? Which what happened when COVID, we had live instructional training for our new sales professionals, and then boom, no more. So as the instructional designer, I tried to fit that into 4 shorter webinars and giving them information on the side and pre-work, and had to bounce it over to online training, right? Nightmare. All right. I can't tell you, it just does not work. I mean, so this has been my quick fix. So what I'm doing now is I'm turning that a little bit into what I call learning quads, 4 pieces, right? An introductory piece, which is a video overview of what they can expect from that topic, supporting documents that they can go look at later, time with their sales enabler or their manager to actually talk about that topic and how it relates to the training or as the work that they do as professionals. And then a follow-up where they take a knowledge check, so there's a way to track without bogging them down, because they don't have the time. They just want to come into the company, get what they need to know, and go on. And so we're finding that by the time they come to the online session, they've learned all this stuff from their sales manager. So we decided, let's flip the script a little bit and let the sales manager run this as a quad. And so it takes an hour or two of the sales manager's time with the sales enablement manager, and the rest of it is on the learner to get right when they need it. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm calling them. I work for Quadient. So you get it, learning quad, right?
Got it.
Yeah. So that's how I'm selling it to the people that are selling.
Awesome. Yeah, you know what? I love that. I love the idea because I can see the quads. I actually made a little drawing here on my notepad, and I can see where if you broke down content, not really content, but curriculum, and made sure that you were addressing each one of these quadrants, that you could be setting yourself up for success, especially if you think about Addie Mall and you think about the development phase. And this fits really nicely in that, to make sure that you are and be sure to check me here if I'm saying this incorrectly, Carol. So it's about providing people with that intro to the learning, the people that need to understand, the what's in it for me, or the so what, or whatever that's going to look like. And then it's like, do I have resources to support the curriculum that I'm putting out, whatever those resources are? And then a really critical thing, and Julie Dirksen told me this a long time ago, is that one of the reasons that training seems to fail is lack of feedback loop. And so I like the idea here that you've got a feedback loop incorporated into one of your quadrants. So that is either time or coaching or mentoring or what have you. And then you have,
Exactly.
That follow-up part, that check-in part, how are we following up with people? And I think that that's
We do survey them.
Yeah.
And we do survey them
Okay.
too. So, but that's, extra
Yeah.
for me. I just want to know, is it?
Yeah, I think that this is, I love this idea. I could see this as being a nice way to sense check what you're doing.
And I have to say, I have been a fan of Addie forever. I mean, I'm old. I've been in the business for a long time, from teaching children to teaching bigger children, right?
Right.
And they're a lot of fun. But the thing is, I always feel so strongly about making sure that you have a plan, even though we have to rapidly prototype and make things iterative so we can fix them on the fly and all that kind of stuff. You still have to have those basic things in place. And when they want to skip that, I am forever telling them, nope, we cannot skip that step. We need to know where we're going with this. What do we really want to accomplish? What do we want them to walk away with? And once we know that, then makes developing so much easier, right? But they always want to skip that and say, let's just put that person on Microsoft Teams and record them and shoot it out. And I'm like, nope. Is there a script? Is there something that you want them to say? Do you want them to make an impact on them for some reason? Right. What is it like? And so that's where you almost have to pull back the tigers a little bit, right? But you don't want to kill their spirit, because their spirit comes a lot of great ideas, right? And so you have to
exactly. And I think that goes well with the comment that Chandra, you put in the chat here about spaced learning is what you're talking about here. So the need to spread out training, especially when you're talking about onboarding. So do you want to talk a little bit about your comment here in the chat about what you're looking for or how you're working with it?
Absolutely. So I have like a couple different examples. So right now I work at TechSmith, and we're talking about onboarding software. And so if you're using Snagit, you might come in and you might just, if we give you everything all at once, right, you might get overwhelmed, and then you forget about some of the other tools that are out there, things you can do. How do you time, on user onboarding so that you time it just right. So it's not annoying to people like, yeah, I've got Snagit and I'm trying to do my work. And now you're giving me these pop-ups to try to teach me about some other tool, but that people find that valuable. So that's one example. And the other example would be like more training new staff. Like I used to work in a financial aid office at Michigan State, and we had to implement a new software system after 30 years of using the same system. So of course, a lot of hesitancy, people didn't really want to move to this new system. And I learned a really good lesson as a new trainer at the time of, I overwhelmed them. I came up with all these weeks of training, and we met in person, we had the computer lab. Some things went well, some didn't. But I think we did a lot of the training before we could use the software. And so a lot of people forgot, it's just a lot of information. And I found people absorbed it much better when I revisited about 12 weeks after the software was implemented. That training was so much more successful because people had, oh, I know where that screen is you're talking about. I know where this is at. I forgot how to do this. Can you show me how? Type of things. So yeah. Right. So I'm trying to think of like if there were any models or practices or principles that might help with those situations.
Absolutely. Who wants to volunteer? I know that there are other people here who are working in this space.
I'm going to jump in here and just say that I know that giving information in small clumps and having people practice it and going back and forth over time is really essential. And as an external consultant, I have my own business. It's so friggin' frustrating because I come in and do a day's training in the old days. Now I do it online, do a 2-hour training, and there's no plan for follow-up or even checking in to see how they are using the skills. So that feedback loop, and this is what I've learned from going to this research-based conference last summer, the Will Thalheimer conference. Some of you may have gone there as well. That all the pros in the field say that feedback is the absolute most essential piece after the actual learning experience. So how the challenge for all of us learning professionals is how do we make that happen? And so, Chandra, I'm wondering what you're doing now to ensure that spaced repetition.
I'm trying to think. I've away a little bit more of like new employee onboarding. So I'm more in the space of just getting into like software user onboarding type of things. Right now, we talk about like the tool tips that pop up and timing, but we're talking a lot more about the frequency of them and should they be these short video snippets and send them to other content and how to time it so that it doesn't annoy the user, but also gives them the tips and tools and feedback that you're talking about. You want to continue, not just have it. I turned on the software, it came up with a bunch of learning tools. I closed it because I just needed to, use it and now, what, I kind of wish I could go back to that and remember and see how they did that. So.
Mm-hmm. I think that whether you're using a spaced training concept, micro learning concept, a blended learning concept, it requires the same sort of instructional design framework. Okay, because you're going to start and again, you guys jump into the chat and you tell me whether or not you feel I'm off base or your ideas as to how you're doing this. But you're using that same curriculum mapping process. Okay, so you're mapping out your content in whatever tool it is that you're using. And then what you're doing is, and what I do in my business is I deconstruct the content. So now I've got the curriculum and I've got the curriculum mapped. And so now it's about breaking apart that curriculum into logical chunks, if you will, bite-sized pieces. And then it's about the process of deciding what is the best delivery tool. And again, this is all part of your basic instructional design model. When you think about design and development, the design function tells you How is it that I am actually going to deliver this training? And now there are different tools to do that. So you can send your spaced learning out. And I just wrote an article on this for training industry. So this is actually timely. So you can send it out via, and Chandra, again, TechSmith in the house. Yay, always happy when TechSmith shows up. Do what you guys do, which is through email, because I get those emails that say, hey, something new has been posted into TechSmith Academy, and that's always very helpful because people can then file those away and they can use it. But one of the other ways that you can use email is through a dedicated automation. So you could say, if you've got a new product that's rolling out and you've got something within TechSmith Academy that you want people to be able to source and go to, you can send a designated email that says lesson 1, let's use Snagit, for example, lesson 1, Snagit features. And then that email is only about that with a link that sends them there. Then that way I can organize that in my email box. Lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4, and I can go and I can see the ones that I want. But when you're doing your curriculum plan, that's how you would map it out in your curriculum plan. And so then you can do that. You can do that very same methodology for your new hires. So a new hire comes on board, and let's say you've got a Slack channel or a Teams channel or whatever it is for them. You can say, here's your welcome info. And now a couple of days later, you're invited to the, you're invited to cocktail hour, to meet the people, and, so on and so forth. So you can break it up into chunks like that. And a tool that I like to use, and I'm going to put it in the chat here, if I can find it. A tool that I like to use is Session Lab. So I like to use Session Lab because it is a dynamic tool that you can use to create curriculum, workshops, whatever it is that you want to create. And what I love about it is it is dynamic. And let me be sure I'm sending this to everybody. There we go. It is dynamic because you go in and you see the boxes and you type in your lesson plan or workshop plan or whatever it is that you want. And you can break it up by learning objectives or learning outcomes or lessons or modules or days. You can color code. See, you guys know me, I'm a Post-it note lover. So you can color code the heck out of everything. And so what I do is I create my lessons or my spaced learning or my drip feeds, and certain things are color coded green or certain things are color coded yellow, et cetera, et cetera. And then also what it'll do is if you double click on one of the boxes, it pops up, and then you can put in attachments or your learning objectives. You can put in facilitator notes. You can put in notes for yourself. You can attach PDF files. So there you can start building out your spaced learning activities there. And it really becomes something that's super handy. It's one of my favorite tools. I still use Post-it notes. I've got a whole wall of Post-it notes in the other room, but now I take those Post-it notes and I move it into Session Lab. So I find that to be really helpful when we're talking about designing, especially drips or spaced.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I forgot that one thing when I onboarded at TechSmith, one thing I really appreciated was my boss had put together an Asana or, Trello type, board, and he spread everything out. So it wasn't like the first day you're reading and you're, it's just like you're overwhelmed. It was so nice to like, okay, here's like a 30-day plan and a 60-day plan and a 90-day plan with links to content that I could go in and read. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how could I take that and then also apply it to people who are new to tools too. So yeah. But I like that mention about email, because I forget, we do have email and certification and academy and all sorts of different ways. Yeah.
Right. And that's a great way to reach your customers in an organized way. So you guys send out your normal emails, which gives me all of the highlights of things that are happening. But if you were to send me one email that told me one thing, because I'm sure you guys have a full mechanism to recognize whether or not I'm new.
Yeah.
So if you sent me one email that told me the one thing that I need to know to get started, and that was it, that would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then Michelle, I see your question here in the chat. It's not an LMS. Session Lab is not an LMS. It is a design tool. And I've never used it for mind mapping, but as with any other tool, you can probably make it work for how you want it to work. The free version allows for solo work. I use the paid version because I like to work more collaboratively. So I'll create a session lab and then I'll invite other people in to help me create it. And you need the paid version to do that. And I don't remember how much it is, but it's not a lot. And believe me, as a solo business owner, it's me and only me and just me and all the me. And if it's something that I'm willing to raise my hand and say, this is something that's worth my money, then it's worth my money. I wish, even if I were in a corporate job, I would have paid out of pocket for this tool. It's one of those. But Matt Pierce, I don't know where he is. Is he in here somewhere? I don't see everybody, but let's see what else we got. I'm going through the chat here real quick. Laura, you say you're with a state agency and it's kind of crazy. What is it that you're working on right now?
My team works with relationship-based professional learning, and so we do training people to facilitate professional learning communities and to do coaching, one-on-one coaching. So that's in the early childhood. So we're working with classroom teachers, preschool, pre-K teachers, and directors of childcare programs.
Oh,
so
yeah.
This was a person who applied for one of our open position. That was just, I read what she wrote about how she approaches pre-service for the teachers in her childcare program, and I was like, no, I don't even want to talk to you. No, too big a gap.
Yeah. I bet that's a challenge, though.
Well, there's a lot they need to know. There's lots that childcare teachers need to know about safety and health regulations and program policies and all of that. And I get it. And I think we can, but most childcare programs want to do all of that in 2 or 3 days before the school year starts. And I have to say, as a former elementary school teacher, school systems do this too. And there's not a lot of professional learning that goes on during the year, kind of this ongoing thing that you guys, that has come up in this conversation, which I think is a shame, because we're educators and we should know better.
Well,
so.
Yes and no. I don't like to point fingers in that direction. I'm
pointing fingers at my own people, so I feel okay about it.
I think that we all have areas in which we could do better. And where I point a finger, and again, those of you who know me know that I'm not shy in doing this, where I do point a finger is if you don't take ownership for your own learning. So you need to take, if you realize that there's some, like those of you who are new to this chat because you wanted to either share something about instructional design or learn something about instructional design, all the high fives. Okay. Yeah, right. Because that's what it's all about. It's you taking, the power back, right? So you're taking the power for your own learning and your own development. And that I think is awesome. So I welcome anyone at any level of where you are at, so we can have this open conversation, because that's how the industry gets lifted, right? So who I'm interested who I'm interested in talking to. I see Rebecca in here a couple of times. So Rebecca, you said you were like you're one of those poor people who works, a solo ID, like you're the only training person, right? And I know there's probably a lot of you on this chat right now who are in that same place. I was in that place once upon a time too. So talk to me then about, you said that you use Smartsheet and you're not a fan. So what is Smartsheet and why are you not a fan of it?
So Smartsheet is a project management tool.
Okay.
And so it's similar to Airtasker and Monday.com and
okay.
But it's I work for the University of Washington in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, but I don't do any student facing, like enrolled student facing work. We have a grant, a federally funded grant from SAMHSA, and we develop and deliver free training for anyone that is in the behavioural health field. Oh. And anyone that is going to come into contact with clients or patients, or however people will refer to them, as people suffering from serious mental health issues. And so because we've got this charter from SAMHSA that we have to deliver this free training, that certainly limits the amount of feedback that we can incorporate to our participants who take the training. And so I'm constantly having conversations with our faculty members who just want to give me bare bones slides and say, just put that online. I'm like, wait, no, we've got to take it back. And so I'm constantly, I've been there for 2 years now, and it's it's very different to what I was doing before I came to the States. I worked at a university in Sydney as a senior learning designer, and I worked primarily with faculty on undergrad and postgrad courses. We did a lot of, because our university implemented Moodle in 2012, and then they made a mandate that all courses had to have an online presence, and which staff weren't happy about because they felt that they were being pushed out of a job. So and there were a lot of other changes going on at the university at the time. So there was like this huge hatred and we were the face of it.
Oh, you poor thing.
But I mean, it was a really great learning experience, and it was a really good reminder of that you're not just dealing with showing someone how to, there's much more around it, and there's a lot of psychology behind the change and how you treat that person and how you react to their responses, which are often knee-jerk. If you can have an open mind and give them that space to let them air whatever is problematic, I found that definitely changed my further relationship with them. But sorry, I'm waffling and going off track. But coming back to Smartsheet, our team uses Smartsheet because another group that we do some crossover work with, they use Smartsheet, and they encouraged us to get Smartsheet because they would get better prices.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't find it intuitive. And my background is in fine arts, and I was a visual arts teacher for years before I got into learning design or got into higher ed stuff. And it's just not intuitive, and it's not a nice looking interface. You don't want to spend time in there. And the problem that our team has is that a lot of people aren't logging in at all. And so there's this constant back and forth about, is this done? Is that done? Can you update the Smartsheet? Yeah, so it's really people have to be invested in it for it to work.
That's painful. That's really painful. And that actually brings up a really good point. You talk about people don't want to be in it. Is anyone out there using design thinking as a foundation for their instructional design models? Anyone out there using that? Design thinking processes?
I just want to say, you know, I kind of know what it is. This is Gila. And it seemed too complex. It's for a lot of the stuff that we need to do. So I think it's really good. You know, it's research-based. I've read a lot about it. To me, it's not practical to use as an approach, but I'd love to hear from other people.
Yeah, so would I, if anybody out there is using it, because I think the idea of design thinking, which is about putting people in the center, because that's about user interface, right? So what are we doing to make it more design friendly for people? You know, and okay, so, Taruna, talk to me about how you're using it. You use it more to empathize with the end user. So are you using it then as part of a learner persona or empathy maps as part of your design? How are you using it?
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks, Shannon. I'm enjoying this conversation so much today, and it's the first time here, and it certainly wouldn't be the last.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I use design thinking, like I said, just to get a sense of the end users. And I do a lot of work with container terminals and training foremen on their job tasks. And design thinking helps me understand where they are actually doing their job on a day-to-day basis, on a daily basis, and therefore, where should I be designing the training? So the training that I've designed does not happen in a classroom. It actually happens on top of the ship, on top of the container ship, 7 feet high. And because that's where they do their job. So the context of them working where they work is important for me to design the training, how I design. So I do use a design thinking process to get an understanding of the problem that I'm trying to solve, but also immerse myself into the work of the end user or the learner in that sense.
So that is about mapping the employee journey. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it is sort of a learner experience mapping, like we would do in the marketing world, the customer experience mapping and the customer touch points. It's the same kind of approach for the learner experience mapping and learner touch points. So I actually use a cognitive apprenticeship model for this training. So a lot of it is task-based, hands-on, along with a coach or a mentor who is performing the task and therefore training and teaching, and then the foreman get a chance to practice the task and receive feedback. So it's situated in an apprenticeship sort of a model, but we still have to figure out what are those touch points where we interact with the learner in the entire process of training.
Mm-hmm. I wish that we would do more and more of that because it just seems to make sense, right? It just seems that that's logical. Unfortunately, a lot of IDs don't do that. They don't really map the journey. You know, what the employee comes in, they turn this on, they do this, they go there, they participate here, they look at this, and what is their journey like? Because if we understood their journey, we would be able to create things that worked more in the flow of their day and would be less disruptive, right? And I think that if we focused more on that, we'd be better off. And so I love what you're saying here. And I think that it's worth doing some additional investigation on how we can incorporate, design thinking into the different models that we're using. And I see, Chandra, I see your question here. How do we balance the importance of understanding these models and making sure we don't exclude potential new hires because they may not be familiar with that particular model? I'm not sure I understand your question. Go ahead.
and I don't know, maybe it was just a thought that I've had in my mind where I see value in these models, but I've seen them used in a way where, it gets, I don't know if it's to say jargony, but like where, I just get frustrated when they become a barrier for people,
Right.
to try to get into a field, or get a particular, maybe they're really versed in one model and not another. And, you go through that checklist of when you're a new hire. And I guess maybe it's just more of a statement or concern about, like, models can be super helpful, but we need to make sure that we look at a lot of different things that a new person could offer the team and their skill set, rather than just say like, oh, you don't know the ADDIE model, well, you're out of here.
Right. No.
Yeah.
I hope nobody's hiring based on that. But I completely agree. And in my opinion, is I use the jargon within this group. I rarely use the jargon outside of this group, and especially when I'm talking to operations or anyone in business, it's like, nope, don't use that, because their eyes will roll back so far in their head, they'll see yesterday, so, and when I'm in the hiring process or when I'm talking to other L&D people, I use different terms. That's like a secret code for me to determine where are they, and so if they look at me kind of like that confused puppy dog look, it's like, okay, they didn't understand that term. It's not that they didn't understand, they don't know it, it's that they don't know that term. Okay, I need to try something else. So I think you're right. It's about openness and collaboration and communication, and not letting the model drive everything. I get a lot of people in my instructional design workshops who think that they don't know instructional design, but it's just that they don't use the vocabulary. It's not they don't know it, they just don't use the vocabulary. And I think if we can help each other with that, that becomes more powerful. So that's my thought, Chandra, as far as that's concerned. So I'm with you. And to that, we're almost at, oh my God, there's like a bajillion new chat messages here while I'm talking. You guys are awesome. But yes, just know that I'm going to, I always share the recording with the people who register for the call. I usually send a copy of the chat, but you can share the chat. You can save the chat yourself. So if you go to the hamburger menu that's next to the message and click on that, I believe you can download the chat from there. But I will include the chat as well with the follow-up email that comes with this. And then also, just as a public service announcement, for those of you who are new, these chats happen every other Friday. So not next week, it's the week after. And the next chat is all about having fun with mind mapping. So we talked a little bit about mind mapping here today, but what I want to do is I really want to have some fun with it. And we'll talk about different mind mapping tools, how we use them. We will we'll do a little bit of group work as far as, working with different mind map, and we'll create a mind map. So I think that this is an opportunity to have some fun with mind mapping. And the one afterwards, the next 3 have already been set up. So mind mapping, jumpstarting curiosity. So how to build curiosity as a habit. And then hopefully, I got TechSmith on me right now. Hopefully the one after that is tips and tricks about Camtasia. So that'll be fun as well. So thank you all for joining me today. And we are almost at the top of the hour. And so if there's any other additional thoughts or comments, you can go ahead and leave them in the chat. And I am going to formally turn off the recording here in a second. But before I do so, again, thank you to everyone who's new, who joined me today. Happy to see all of the new faces. I hope to see you back here again and be part of our own little learning rebellion that happens here on our journey